Sex. Sex is one's biological identity, either male or female. Gender is socially learned expectations, identities, and behaviors associated with a certain sex. Behavior associated with gender is culturally learned. Gender is a system of social practices, and biology alone does not determine gender identity. Sex refers to the biological differences between male and females. Gender refers to the continuum of complex psychosocial self-perceptions, attitudes, and expectations people have about members of both sexes. Even the terms male and female, man and woman are not interchangeable. What it means to be male or female originates from physical characteristics that derive from sex chromosomes and genes that lead to certain gonads, internal and external genitalia, and psychological hormones. This at least partially explains why gender is now preferred in this extended use. Gender denotes identity, which can be fluid and complicated, whereas what sex organs one has is pretty straightforward. Sex is still sometimes used in traditional senses. The meaning of words sa sex has not really been in contention until the Supreme Court deliberations. Ideology, not science, asserts that change it cannot be stated strongly enough. A disingenuous defining of gender roles. Muna yung discrimination sa gender or sex. In an employment setting, gender and sex discrimination refer to situations in which an employee or a group of employees is harassed or treated differently by an employer because of their sex or gender. Muna yung mga causes and effects of gender discrimination. Gender discrimination, rooted in an unequal distribution of power, has far-reaching consequences that affect every facet of society. Historically directed at women, gender discrimination manifests in variety of ways, including restricted access to educational and employment opportunities, increase. Everyone, regardless of gender, is protected from sex discrimination under title The Equal Pay Act requires employers to give male and female employees equal pay for equal work. This means that employers have to pay men and women equally for during substantially and at the same work at the same workplace. Example of sex discrimination. Here is an example of unfair treatment at work that may be based on sex. Muna yung example, Joanne applies at a local company that routinely hires high school students to work on construction crews. The manager steers her towards a secretary position at the company headquarters. Munang isa ka example. Muna yung mga example of Gender socialization. Definition of gender socialization: giving biological females dressing them in pink or referring to them as she or her. Dapat pang babae yun suot sa babae or Tagalog mga Barbie anak. A gender role is what you are expected to be. Gender socialization is the process of learning your role. Ano yung affect sa gender? Social justice is certainly a priority for authorities, but it must be recognized that their ability to extend its application in compliance has always posed a problem. He said, Huda said despite notable progress in gender equality and freedom. What are some socialization theories of gender? Gender is binary. Only two genders exist, male and female. Dapat babae ug laki, o tomboy ug bayot. Mga laki ra babae ang exist jud. Gender is non-binary. There are finite number of genders which can be identified and defined. At least the majority are some combination of the female and male. Gender is non-binary. There is an infinite number of genders which can't be specially named or numbered. How do people become socialized to gender roles? Explain how socialization occurs and recurs throughout life. Understand how people are socialized into new role at age-related transition points. Describe when and how socialization occurs. Mga different types of gender identity. Muna yung gender batch, cisgender, gender expansive, gender fluid, gender outlaw, gender queer, masculine of the center. Muna yung mga facts about gender identity. Gender identity refers to a person's internal sense of being male, female, or something else. Some say that roots of gender identity issues are cultural, that how a culture views a boy or girl influences gender identity. Parents and other people label and begin to react to the child based on his or her genitals. The social labeling of a baby as a boy or girl leads different treatment which produce the child's sense of gender identity. When Western societies view gender as having two categories, masculine and feminine, and see man and woman as different species. What do you mean sex and gender? Many people use the word sex and gender interchangeably, but they are distinct concepts of scientists defining differences. Sex is biological. It's based on your genetic makeup. Males have one X and one Y chromosome in every cell of the body. Female have two X chromosomes in every cell. Muna yun guys. Muna yung kalayaan sa gender and sexual. Gender and sex. Thank you.
So good day, I am Rodrigo S. Gumagay Jr. and today let's talk about gender identity. So what is gender identity? Gender identity is each person's internal and individual experience of a gender. It is their sense of being a woman, a man, both, neither, or anywhere along the gender spectrum. A person's gender identity may be the same as a different from their birth-assigned sex. So gender identity is a fundamentally different from a person's sexual orientation. So for further explanation, so there are gender expression. What is gender expression? Gender expression is how much a person publicly presents their gender. This can include behavior and outward appearance such as a dress, hair, makeup, body language, and voice. A person's chosen name and pronoun are also common ways of their expressing their gender. So The other genders are the trans or the transgenders. So, transgenders or a trans is an umbrella term referring to people with diverse gender identities and expressions that differ from the stereotypical gender norms. It includes, but it is not limited to, people who identify as a transgender or a trans woman. So male to female, and trans man is to female to male. Transsexual, cross-dresser, gender or non-conforming gender, variant or gender queer. So kay sa ilahang pag-change nila, so hindi na malikayan ang discrimination from the other people around them. So the discrimination happens when a person experiences negative treatment or impact, that intentional or not, because of their gender identity or gender expression. It can direct and obvious to subtle and hidden but harmful just the same. It can also happen on a bigger systemic level, such as organizational rules of policies that look neutral but end up including trans people, friends, family, or others who face discrimination because of their association with a trans person are also protected. And mas kuan pa sa discrimination naasad joy uban nga mangharas or harassment. So harassment is a form of discrimination. It can include sexually explicit or other inappropriate comments, questions, jokes, name calling, images, or email and social media, and transphobic, homophobic, or other bullying, sexual advances, touching, and other unwelcome and ongoing behavior that insults, demeans, harms, or threatens a person in some way. Also, they assault or other violent behavior because it's also a criminal matter. So trans people and other persons who experience harassing behavior because of their gender identity or their expression, gender-based harassments and or their sex or sexual harassment. So social stereotypes about gender and prejudice and fear towards trans people are often at the root of discrimination and harassment. So negative attitudes about a trans person's racial identity, family status, or other grounds can combine, intersect, make things worse, and everyone has the right to define their own gender identity. So trans people should be recognized and treated as a gender they live in, whether or not they have undergone surgery or their identity documents are up to date. And an organization should be a valid reason for collecting and using personal information that identities of a person's gender. They should keep this information confidential. Trans people can have their name or sex designation changed on identity documents and other records. So the criteria and the process should be not intrusive or medically based. So trans people should have access to washrooms, change rooms, and other gender-specific services and facilities based on their lived gender identity. So also in the dress code policies should be inclusive and flexible, and they should not prevent trans people and others from dressing according to their expressed gender. Organizations should be designed or change their rules and practices and facilities to avoid negative effects on trans people and be more inclusive for everyone. And any expectations must be legitimate in the circumstances, and the trans people must be provided any needed accommodation unless it would cause undue hardships. The duty to accommodate the needs of trans people is a shared responsibility and everyone involved. So it should be cooperate in the process, exchange only necessary information, and explore options while respecting privacy. So, trans people and other gender non-conforming individuals should not be treated negatively while at a work, at a school, or trying to rent an apartment, shopping, eating meal in a restaurant, using healthcare services or shelters, dealing with the law enforcement and justice services, or any other time. So we have to respect transgenders or what the people express their genders, so that there are no harassment and no discrimination for what they express. That's it. Thank you.
I'm Ivan J. Hinon, and my topic is all about transgender. So, what does transgender mean? So, transgender is an umbrella term for a person whose gender identity and gender expression of behavior does not conform to that typically associated with the sex to which they were assigned at birth. So, the gender identity refers to a person's internal sense of being male, so female, or something else. Gender expression refers to the way a person communicates gender identity to others throughout behavior. So, clothing, hairstyles, voice, or the characteristics. So, for example, is gay, kanang bayot, usbo niyang tingog, then magpa-long hair siya, then babae o porma, na uban gani magpatutoy. So, it's some used as shorthand for transgender, while transgender is generally as a good term to use. Not everyone whose appearance or behavior is gender non-confirming will identity as a transgender person. The ways that transgender peoples are talked about in popular culture, academia, and science are constantly changing, particularly as individuals' awareness, knowledge, and openness about transgender people and their experience grow. And that's all. Thank you.
Then I'm going to report by sexuality. So let's start guys. So what is sexuality? Human sexuality is the way people experience and express themselves sexually. So kani sila kay if human sexuality kay dapat express kasi mo na feel or sa mo sex. So but this involves biological, erotic, physical, emotional, social, and spiritual feelings and behaviors. So, ano siya kay? Ano siya mga na-feel ni mo ba siya mong sex? If unsadid ka. If na ba ka sa opposite ba ka or same sex ba yung kanahan? Through what? Through feelings and behaviors na rin. So, sexuality kaya na siya mga broad term which is valid in historical context over time. So, sexuality is about your feelings ninyo, mga thoughts, mga attractions ninyo, concern ninyo, mga ganahan, attractions and other behaviors towards other people. Ano mga na-attract ba ka sa lain yung babae na sa prehaba mo, sex ba mo towards other people. So you can find other people physically, sexually, or emotionally attractive. Di ka makatanaw tanaw sa imong ganahan kanina ibog ba nito physical, sexual, or emotional active ba nimo para nimo ana. Kato all of those things are part of your sexuality. So katotanan ay part sa imong sex o sexuality. And so mauto. So na may dagan, there are many different types of sexuality. Pwede mong na-feel at saka nalipay na kuhan. So it can take time to figure out the sexuality that fits you the best, and your sexuality can change over time. So kuhan man, wala man yung dali. So hindi pa ka sure or unsure pa ka dito yung sexuality unsa gyud mo feel ba so comfortable or nalipay sa imong unsa ka take time to figure out sexuality fits you the best of unsa gyud fit nimo ba. Take time lang jud if wala pa ka decide kay nana mo na. So sexuality is an important part of who you are. So mo to siya important din jud kayo ang sexuality para nimo. If unsa jud ka ayun ikaw wow, dapat proud ka. Madawat ra jud ka na sometime madawat ka na. If di pala sa karon tumabot pa jud ang time na madawat ka. Kay wala sige pili ang ginoo unsa jud mo unsa jud ka kuan dawat ang tanan. Yeah, your sexuality can change over time. So nasa possibility na ikaw kay hindi kuan ka karon gay ka karon may chance ka mabalik kang lucky na lang lucky ka karon may chance nga mabayog ka po na lang. So ma-change it siya over time ang kuan matangay ba kay kalit ka gay ka nga bayog na nimo ano. So sexuality, some people have hard time na accepting others who are different sa themselves. So, kasi line tao nga ikadawat na na ba ilagin bolihon kini siya bayad siya tanaw nila mo kay bati na kayo lagi lain ka nila ba. So lagi ibang tao nga lisod dawat para nila inana. So yun, if someone gives you hard time about your sexuality, it's good to have someone about it. So easy mga taon na yun kasi kung ano mo lang mo na kung sa nana ba't nakasamputin mo sa akin ba katagay mo na sa nana na mo sa abot sa ginana. Dapat ikaw di ka malipay mo siya niya proud ka asa ka malipay asa ka comfortable makita na nila ayun lang yung pa-asip na di ka pa-asip niya dili di ka happy sa imong kuhan karon asip ko. So nice to di mo ipakita nila nana ka di ka parehan nila gay ba or isa pa na niya tomboy. You don't need to deal with it by yourself so much. So di ka kailangan mag-deal para usap ko ni kay di sila ganahan ayaw patagal sila asa ka balik di alam ay padahan sila mga story niya asa ka magkapit niya din. So mga na to guys, thank you.
Sexuality often refers to a person's sexual orientation, preference, or sexual orientation is who you are emotionally, mentally, and physically attracted to. And there are 5 circles of sexuality. And the first circle is sensuality. Sensuality is the state or quality of being sensual, fondness, or
or indulgence in sensual pleasures. Sensuality is defined as enjoyment of sensual or sexual pleasure, or is defined as a condition of being pleasing to the senses. And the second circle is intimacy. Intimacy is closeness between people or personal relationships. It is what builds over time as you connect with someone, grow to care about each other, and feel more and more comfortable during your time together. It can include physical or emotional closeness, or even a mix of the two. And the third circle is identity. Identity is the qualities, beliefs, personality, traits, appearance, and or expressions that characterize a person or group. In sociology, emphasis is placed on collective identity, in which an individual's identity is strongly associated with group behavior, or the collection of group memberships that define them. The fourth circle is behavior, and reproductive behavior is the behavior related to the production of offspring and includes all aspects from the establishment of mating systems, courtship, sexual behavior, and parturition to the care of young. And the last circle is sexualization. Sexualization is to make something sexual in character or quality, or to become aware of sexuality, especially in relation to men and women. Sexual identity is how one thinks of oneself in terms of to whom one is romantically and or sexually attracted. Sexual identity may also refer to sexual orientation identity, which is when people identify or disidentify with a sexual orientation, or choose not to identify with a sexual orientation. And there are four components of sexual identity. The first component is biological sex. Biological sex means the condition of being male or female, which is determined by a person's chromosomes and is identified at birth by a person's anatomy. Those who reject their biological sex are sometimes referred to as transgender. And the second component is gender identity. Gender identity is each person's internal and individual experience of gender. It is their sense of being a woman, a man, both, neither, or anywhere along the gender spectrum. A person's gender identity may be the same as or different from their birth assigned sex. And the fourth component is a gender role. A gender role, also known as a sex role, is a social rule encompassing a range of behaviors and attitudes that are generally considered acceptable, appropriate, or desirable for a person based on that person's sex. And the last component is sexual orientation. Sexual orientation is an enduring pattern of romantic or sexual attraction, or a combination of these, to persons of the opposite sex or gender, the same sex or gender, or to both sexes or more than one gender.
Sexual orientation is is a term used to refer to a person's pattern of emotional, romantic, and sexual attraction to people of a particular gender, like male or female. Sexuality is an important part of who we are as humans. Beyond the ability to reproduce, sexuality also defines how we see ourselves and how we physically relate to others. Sexual orientation is usually divided into these categories: heterosexual, attracted to people of the opposite sex. Like example, ang laki ma-attract sa bayi, ang bayi ma-attract og laki. Bisexual, attracted to people of either sex. Example, ang tomboy ma-attract siya sa bayi, ma-attract siya sa laki. Bayot ma-attract sa laki, ma-attract siya sa bayi. Homosexual, attracted to people of one's own sex. Example aning homosexual kay ang laki ma-attract og laki, ang bayi ma-attract og bayi. Pansexual, attracted to people of any gender identity. Ang pansexual ma-attract siya bisag unsa nga klase nga gender. Asexual, not sexually attracted to other people. Dili gid siya ma-attract. Sexual orientation involves a person's feelings and sense of identity. It's not necessarily something that noticeable to others. People may or may not act on the attraction they feel. What determines sexual orientation? Most scientists agree that sexual orientation, including homosexuality and bisexuality, is the result of a combination of environmental, emotional, hormonal, and biological factors. In other words, many things contribute to a person's sexual orientation, and the factor may be different for different people. Homosexual and bisexuality aren't caused by the way children were reared by their parents or by something that happened to them when they were young. Also, being homosexual or bisexual does not mean the person is mentally ill or abnormal in any way. They may face burden caused by the other people, prejudice, or misunderstanding. How do we people know their sexual orientation? Many people discover the sexual orientation as teens or young adults and in many cases without any sexual experience. For example, someone may notice that their sexual thoughts and activities focus on people of the same sex or both sexes, but it's possible to have fantasies or to be curious about people of the same sex without being homosexual or bisexual, and they may not pursue those attractions. Can sexual orientation be changed? Experts agree that sexual orientation isn't a choice and can't be changed. Some people who are homosexual or bisexual may hide their sexual orientation to avoid prejudice from others or shame they may have been taught to feel about their sexuality. Trying to change someone to a heterosexual orientation, including so-called conversion therapy, doesn't work and can be damaging. Experts don't recommend this. In fact, the American Medical Association calls it clinically and ethically inappropriate. Are there support groups for people struggling with their sexuality? Yes. Various support groups and organizations are available. They can help a person come up with way to deal with the prejudice, bias, and stereotypes that may LGBTQ people have experienced at the same point, and also address safety rights and health issues. LGBTQ stands for lesbians, gays, bisexual, transgender, and queer. While homosexual or bisexual orientation isn't a mental health problem, There are higher rates of depression and substance abuse, including alcohol and other drugs, among lesbians, gay, and bisexual young adults. Suicide risk is also higher among LGBTQ people. Research shows that risk is higher for those who came up from families who didn't accept them for who they are and for those who were bullied or abused.
What is heterosexism? Heterosexism, sometimes referred as homophobia, is defined as the marginalization and or oppression of people who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, queer, and or asexual, based on the belief that heterosexuality is the norm. This means that heterosexism is based on the idea that romantic and or sexual relationships between a man and a woman is acceptable, and that all other relationships or feelings are unacceptable or outside the norm. Despite advances, LGBTQ people continue to face bias, discrimination, and injustice in our classrooms, workplaces, media, streets, and digital spaces. While great strides have been made in recent years, including marriage equality, there is still much work to do to achieve equity for members of the LGBTQ community. Consider the following statistics. The FBI reports that all of the hate crimes reported in 2018, which are still underreported in general, 16.7% of those were people targeted because of bias against sexual orientation. The FBI defines hate crime as a criminal offense against a person or property motivated in whole or in part by an offender's bias against a race, religion, disability, sexual orientation, ethnicity, gender, or gender identity. Prior to the 2020 Supreme Court ruling, there were only 28 states that protected people from discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and or gender identity in employment or work, housing and public accommodations, retail stores, rental establishments, recreational facilities, and etc. The June 2020 SCOTUS ruling, LGBTQ plus employees in all 50 states are protected from discrimination. In 73 countries, being gay, lesbian, bisexual, or transgender is illegal. This means more than 2.7 billion people live in countries where being gay is a crime. How does heterosexism manifest? On an interpersonal level, people experience heterosexism in a wide variety of ways, including name-calling and teasing, bullying and harassment, anti-gay slurs, isolation and exclusion, microaggression, stereotypes, being judged, not being accepted or supported by family and others, and many more. It is important to note that many people, including young people, may unintentionally participate in or promote heterosexism because they don't understand its harm or because they are simply reflecting what they have learned from the media, family, school, and the society. Every day, in school classrooms, hallways, cafeterias, LGBTQ students hear biased language and experience harassment and assault and feel the effects of a hostile environment. According to GLSEN's 2017 National School Climate Survey, LGBTQ students experience the following: 98.5% gay, heard gay used in negative way, like "That's so gay" at school. 70% heard these remarks often or frequently, and 91.8% reported that they felt distressed because of this language. 70.1 experienced verbal harassment, example, called names or threatened at school based on sexual orientation. 59.5% felt unsafe at school because of their sexual orientation. 55.3% were victimized in school and did not report the incident to the school staff, and most commonly because they doubted effective intervention would occur or feared the situation could become worse if they reported the incident. 62.2% reported experiencing LGBTQ related discriminatory policies or practices at school. 34.8% missed at least one entire day of school in the past month because they felt uncomfortable and unsafe. How can schools create safe environment for LGBTQ students? On a positive note, Geoson's research indicates that when schools have inclusive LGBTQ curriculum, supportive educators, GSA or gender and sexuality alliances, and supportive and inclusive policies, the school climate is safer and more inclusive. It is helpful to consider what we can do to act as an ally to those targeted by heterosexism. This can include challenging slurs when you hear them, reaching out to someone who's been targeted, start or participate in GSA, not participating in a heterosexist name calling, and challenging heterosexism online. And we should take action to prevent these incidents to happen and protect all genders.